Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5, question 5, compare int lists. So this question says, write a function that takes two int lists, list 1 and list 2 of the same length. The function should compare the combined values of the elements in list 1 and list 2, considering them as integers formed by concatenating their elements. Determine which combined integer is larger and return -1 if list 1's combined integer is smaller, 1 if list 2's combined integer is smaller, and 0 if they are equal. For example, if list 1 contains 3237 and list 2 contains 8713, combining the elements results in 3237 and 8713. And since 8713 is greater than 3237, then list 2 is larger than list 1, and the output is -1. Okay, and the question also says that you cannot use the compare or compare to methods of the class integer. Awesome. So I am gonna briefly go over that example one more time and also go over some cases that you guys should know when solving this question. First thing to note is we are given these values as inputs. So for example, in the case of 3237, the input is of a list of values 3237, and same thing for list 2. So the first step behind understanding this problem is how can we convert this list of values 3237 into an actual integer of individual integers concatenated into one big number. And the same thing also applies for list 2, because after we concatenate, right, all of the integers into one big number, we can then compare these two numbers and return the corresponding value 1, -1, 0, depending on this big number. And then as a review, the requirements for this question is that if the number of list 1 is more than list 2, then return 1. If the number at list 1 is less than list 2, then return -1. And if the number at list 1 is equal to list 2, then return 0. And then as a reminder, I want to remind you of a couple of important int list functions that are going to be reoccurring in this course. The first is dot first. Dot first returns the first node of your int list. Dot item returns the value at the current node that you're at. And dot next returns the next node, so the node that the dot first node points to. Okay, awesome. So recall that I just talked about, or just brought up this question of like, how can we concatenate this entire list of values 3237 into one big number 3237? Well, we can actually loop through the int lists, list 1 and list 2, such that we loop through all the elements in the list and we add the values in the list into a string. And after we've done that, we can then convert the string into an integer using an integer.parseInt function in the integer class. Okay, but the first step is I want to convert this list into a number. So I'm going to loop through, and I'm going to loop through until all the elements of list 1 are done, which means that list 1 dot first is not equal to null. And because list 1 and list 2 are of the same length, there's no need for you to have both conditions for both list 1 and list 2. So now I'm going to add all of the elements. I'm going to add the item of the current node that I'm at this list to my strings that I've initialized before this while loop. So I'm going to say num1 is equal to num1 plus list1 dot item, and num2 is equal to num2 plus list1 dot item. So with that, I've now created a, I'm now concatenating or now I'm adding all of the integers from this list into a string. But I also have to sequentially go through every single element in this list. So I need to move to the next pointer in this int list by saying num1, not num1, sorry, list1, which is because list1 is our int list. List1 is equal to list1 dot next, and list2 is equal to list2 dot next. Okay, so now we have this concatenation of a number, right? But now in this case, the number is in the form, for example, if we were to do it for like give an example, the numbers are in the form of a string. So for list one, it would be 3, 2, 3, 7. And for list two, it would be 8, 7, 1, 3. But now, how do we then compare these two values and then return the corresponding value, like 1, -1, and 0, depending on which of these two values is greater? Well, we can use a really handy method in the integer class called dot parse int. And this method takes the input of a string. So I'm going to say string str, and it returns the corresponding integer value of that string if the inputted values of the string, if the parsed value is also an integer. What I mean by that is, for example, in this case, even though this is a string, the parsed values of the string are an integer. So we can say if integer dot parse int of num1 is greater than integer dot parse int of num2, then we have to return 1. And for brevity's sake, I'm just going to do parse int for the next else statement. But the other condition is if integer dot parse int of num1 is less than integer dot parse int of num2, then you have to return -1. And if they're equal, then we just return 0. And that concludes the solution for question 5, compare int lists.